Hello and welcome. I'm Lenny Tvedten, and each month we'll be visiting with Martin County veterans in a series called Their Sacrifices, Our Freedom. Today joining me are Aaron Meier and Marlin Wrucke. First of all, thank you for your service and thank you for being in my book. I really appreciate that. First of all, if each of you could tell us just a little bit about yourself. And Aaron, we'll start with you.
Aaron Meier. I was born and raised here in Fairmont, Minnesota, even though it may not sound like that anymore. I do get confused when I got back to town. Where are you from? Well, I'm from here. I graduated in 1999. I joined the United States Army for the experience in college education. Decided to stay in, made it a career. After 22 years, I retired. My wife, who's from Oklahoma, she said, well, hey, you've been away from home for a long time. How about we move back to Minnesota? I said, okay, let's go do that. So when I retired, I came back to Fairmont. And I've been enjoying the retired life a little bit here. So
okay. Good, thank you. Marlon?
I graduated from Mapleton High School in 1965, went on to Mankato State University, graduated from there in 1969. Then the Army draft got a hold of me that summer. And
big government job?
Yeah, it was my first job. And from there, I went into basic training at Fort Bragg, North Carolina, advanced infantry training at Fort Polk, Louisiana, and from there I went to Vietnam.
Very good. Then if we can talk a little bit about your military experience, what primarily did you do while you were in the service? Where and when you served? I know you mentioned a little bit about that already. Maybe some memorable experiences. Or things that you think would be important to discuss. So, Aaron?
So it's a long conversation. It's 22 years is a very long time to go over. But so after I joined the military, I went to basic training in EIT, advanced training at Fort Leonard Wood, Missouri. As a military police officer, I enlisted as first. So I got out of basic training EIT. They shipped me to Fort Riley, Kansas. Not that far away from home, which wasn't so bad. So I got the Army life, and then I was able, when I had leave time, to come back home. It's only 6.5 hours away.
Sure.
So it was kind of nice that way. From there, this is all prior to September 11th, too. We were not at war at this time. We had been through Desert Storm, but no one around the area really had been to combat. So I joined in basically peacetime. From Fort Riley, I went over, they stationed me over in Germany at that point. Whilst I was on leave, though, September 11th did happen, unfortunately. I was home on leave. We had a phone call from our grandmother saying, oh my gosh, they blew up the CNN building. And we didn't know what's going on, so we scrambled to a TV and we watched the second plane hit the tower. And that's when I freaked out right away because I'm home on leave. And I just left an installation going overseas. I was supposed to fly the 14th of September. What a bad time. I scramble, I have to go home. Run back to Fairmont here from Jackson. Look at my parents' answer machine because that's the phone number I gave. Nothing. I'm dialing frantically to call back to Fort Riley, thinking they're going to be calling me up. You got to come back now. We're going to war. When I finally got through, one of the staff sergeants there said, no. We're busy. You need to call the numbers on your leave form, which is Big Army, Department of the Army. You need to call them. So after being on the line for about 6 hours on hold with the Department of the Army, they'd asked me, hey, where are you at? So I'm still home on leave. Well, you're supposed to fly the 14th. Yes. I'm on a leave address. Stay there. You now belong to Big Army. Here's a number you call every day for accountability. So every day for 4 hours, stood on hold just to call them saying, hey, I'm alive, I'm still at my home station. And then they were working on getting me flights, and then the 21st of September, I flew to Germany. Whilst I'm in Germany, I'm doing my normal MP business like I had been doing, and everybody there was on pins and needles. Now everybody, it was live during that time. I can't say everybody nowadays because I know if somebody could be born in 2000 and didn't know anything about it, now they're 20s. Anybody that's alive during that time knows that it was very contentious at that time. We were on edge. We were on edge in Europe. We expected to go to war. We already sent, by the time I got to Germany and started working, by October we had special forces in Afghanistan. And we all expected, okay, we're going to train up, we're going to go to Afghanistan. And then we didn't. And then as part of the 1st Armored Division at the time, we didn't. When are we going to go? We have no idea what's going on. We start more of our training up like we always did anyway for combat because that's what the Army does. And in the middle of our rotation to Grafenwehr, Germany, which is the big training area in Germany, they changed all of our scenarios up because we had been for Russia, counter Russia, changed it all up. Well, what's going on? Now you're changing for the desert. Interesting. For the next 3 months, we're training up harder than we had been before. What's going on? This is not, okay, are we going to Afghanistan? And no one would tell us anything. They said, no, we started watching the news, now you're going to Iraq. In 2003, I deployed the 1st Armored Division to Iraq. We got there at the end of April, as 3rd ID had already smashed through and just went straight to Baghdad and took out everybody in their path, along with the Marines. The 3rd ID did the brunt of that work. We got in right after them. After we got unloaded in Kuwait, we spent a couple days, got our vehicles, we pushed into Iraq with the 1st Armored Division MPs. We escort people up the routes. So we were escorting everybody to get to Baghdad, to take over from 3rd ID. When we got in, most of what we saw, you'd think combat right away. You see all the movies. You were in Vietnam, whole different story. I know you saw a lot of combat. But when anybody else, you see it, you think, oh man, it's going to be so bad. We drove across the border. Well, we saw it first, and the 3rd ID saw it differently. When we drove across, though, it was mostly refugees, people coming out that were hungry and starving. They're trying to mob our trucks and steal our stuff because they were hungry and they wanted water. Through Basra and up to Baghdad. So we didn't see a lot. We got some pot shots. We were just escorting people the first part of that war. We started seeing a lot of stuff with the insurgency when it started kicking off a few months later.
You were talking about your experience compared to Vietnam. How do you relate those as being different?
Well, everything that's been explained to me, just my only experience in Vietnam is either what I've seen on movies
Sure,
now,
yeah.
or from other veterans that have talked to me.
People who've been there.
And the insurgency that was in Vietnam, from what we saw in Iraq, was totally two different things. The enemy was different. The terrain's different. I mean, you're going from jungle to an open desert now. Yes, you have explosives and everything hidden, but you don't have people hiding in holes necessarily all the time.
You don't have that hand-to-hand combat necessarily.
Not necessarily like that. The willingness to fight of your enemy too. In Iraq, they would pot shot and run. You don't have an army trying to wipe you out right away.
Mm-hmm. From what you said, Marlin, what's your experience in Vietnam, or how do you compare the two?
Well, from Fort Bragg, North Carolina, I went down to Fort Polk for advanced infantry training. And checking in down there, they needed a clerk at Special Troops Headquarters. And they asked me if I would mind doing that instead of being in the infantry. And I said, you bet. So I ended up being on the job training down at Fort Polk, Louisiana. And I was then shipped out, and I went to Vietnam, and I was fortunate enough to end up being stationed at the headquarters of the Army at Long Binh Post. And I worked in the Personal Actions Division of the headquarters of the Army for the full year I was there. I was limited basically to pulling guard duty once every 2 weeks for 24 hours. And so I really never, the only time I really shot a weapon over there was during training.
Okay.
And we got trained on M60s, things like that, and pulled guard duty for 12 hours in a 24-hour period. And I was fortunate enough not to have ever had to shoot my weapon. I worked in Personal Actions Division of the headquarters, and my duties included non-supported dependents. A lot of soldiers went over there to get away. And of course, they would stop their allotments to their families, and I had to find them and get their company COs to counsel them. And then I told them, well, whether you're counseled or not, the money is going to your families. And I also handled another item called broken enlistment contracts, where people signed up to go in the Army, and with promises of going to certain schools and getting promoted at certain times, and those things didn't happen. And I ended up, I think I got about 400 guys out of the service early for broken enlistment contracts while I was over there.
So they were told they would be able to do certain things?
Right, and it never happened. And it wasn't through no fault of their own.
Okay.
And
so they got an early release as a result?
Right, most of them already had 2 years in.
Okay.
And so if they were a 4-year enlistee and they didn't get whatever they were promised, they reverted to a 2-year status. And most of them, as soon as I signed off on it and went through headquarters, they were released.
Sure.
And they got out of the service right then.
In terms of your entering the military, Marlin, you were drafted.
Correct.
And you volunteered.
Sure.
How is your reaction to that, to the draft and to volunteering? What effect do you think that had on each of you?
Well, it changed my life. That's for sure. Um, While in college, of course, it was called a 2S deferment, which gave you 4 years to get your degree. And if you didn't get it in 4 years, too bad. They were going to draft you. And so it behooved you to not slough and get it. And as soon as I graduated, I was drafted.
So in many cases, somebody that was drafted, myself included, may not have entered the military. So what prompted you, Aaron, to want to go into the military since you weren't under the draft?
I did it because my father, my grandfather, my uncle, multiple other relatives had some sort of service in the past.
You have a family history then?
Yes, family history
serving.
in my family, and there was no illusion about what the military was. But I joined because of the family history. There was experience to be had. The military's great. They teach you a skill.
Right.
And then there's the college money. Did I do it for patriotism at first? No, I didn't. I was a dumb kid. I was coming straight out of high school, and hey, this is easy way to get college money, get experience. They're going to train you great.
Right.
And I think I know everything, and that's what I'm going to go do.
Sure.
So,
well, kind of what you can see is Marlin, you had a desk job. When I was in, I had basically a desk job. You had something different. A couple of people we talked to earlier were in Vietnam on the front lines. But it all works together. It's like a team, because no matter where you're at, if the other individual and the other type of work isn't doing what they need to do, it's not going to get done. Thinking back to your time in the service, what would you characterize as maybe your most memorable event, or the most memorable thing you encountered, or most influential perhaps?
there's been again, multitude of things in 22 years. I got to meet President Bush in Iraq. That was neat. It just happened because we were working protective services for a general, and before he'd come for that Thanksgiving in 2003, the general asked us, "Hey, do you guys want to eat here at our base, which was outside of Baghdad?" It wasn't great. It was a mobile field kitchen. And it wasn't the food. Don't get me wrong. The food is better than eating MREs all the time, but when you have an actual hard dining facility that's contracted, the food is so much better. What do you want to eat here at this mobile kitchen trailer with the Army cooks? Again, not bad. It's not, you have a contract in place. Or do you want to go to Baghdad and eat the contract in place? We said, not a question, sir. We'll go to Baghdad. We'll take you through harm's way to get to Baghdad.
Yeah.
Or you can fly and we'll drive through harm's way. It's no problem. We want to go eat here.
Sure.
We'll put our lives in line just to go eat good turkey up here. He said, well, good, because something historic is going to happen. And we couldn't figure out for the life of us what that meant. What is he talking about? Now, that's called OPSEC. It's Operation Security. He let a little bit slide to us at first, a little grandule. And then we found out more stuff because more security started getting heightened. And then we started seeing the guys in really hot, well, it's 80 still, in suits, in little earwigs, running around. And you kind of figure it out. And you can't say anything, but you're like, yeah, oh, okay, we kind of, it's either a congressman or something's going on. And then when we finally got inside and we got sat down, they brought up President Bush, and it just went wild. And that was neat.
Yeah, I'll bet.
That was very neat to do.
Marlon, how about you?
I would say the most memorable thing that I remember was R&R in Bangkok, in Sydney, Australia, which was it was really a fun week. And I had the opportunity to take a 1 week's leave, and I did that in Bangkok, Thailand. So I saw two parts of the world I may never get the chance to see again, but it was a great time. I grew up a lot in the military. I thought, well, when I graduate from college, I'm growing up. I wasn't even close.
Yeah.
I found out what the world was about. We were in a little incubator here in southern Minnesota.
Right.
That's where I grew up, and I'm back here. But I did learn a lot.
Safe to say that military experience had a major influence on our lives. Our life.
Yes, it did. The one thing that I really remember was the day we flew home. We landed in Seattle, and they wouldn't let us go right to the concourse. They had us get out of the plane on the tarmac, and the protesters were throwing eggs and tomatoes and everything at us, calling us baby killers. And I thought, wow, I'm so glad to be back here. And then this happens. It was disgusting.
Yeah, I've never understood why that was the way it was. I happened to be in the Coast Guard in Cleveland, and they were treated with so much respect. It was just amazing. And why military was treated that way when people in the Army, Marines, Air Force, Coast Guard, Navy, they didn't cause what was happening.
It's like, what if any of those protesters got drafted? Now you're in the same. You gonna throw those eggs out yourself? No, you don't get the choice. Especially when you're drafted, you don't get the choice.
You're doing the job you were given. Okay, thank you, Aaron and Marlin, for your service, and thank you to our viewers and our sponsors, the Mike Gary family, Sweet Financial Partners, Erpelding Boyd and Company CPAs, Lucy Prentice, American Legion Post number 36 of Fairmont, for making this show possible. We'll see you again next time on Their Sacrifices, Our Freedom.